I love to read. And a lot of times people ask me, what are the most impactful books? What are the ones that if I wanted to, know what you know, get up to what you know, what would be the books that I read? And I really started thinking about this because this one particular person was asking me, he wanted to fast track his marketing. So he said, if I, just these 10 books to catch up to you. And I really started thinking earnestly about like, what have been the books that have made me, let's say, that what have led to the thoughts that led to the thoughts that led to the actions that led to the experiences that built on an entire foundation on which I've built everything that I've ever accomplished in marketing. And I started thinking about if I could like narrow it down, what's the one book? And I started thinking, well, if it was that book, but that lesson is only applicable if you know this book, or it was this lesson in this book that was shaped the way I thought about this lesson in this book. And I started writing down some of the books and I looked at them, I said, dude, you can't catch up. Like it's really, that's the absolute truth, is there's no way to catch up from book learning. But what I'm going to share over this series here is I've got some of the most impactful books that have really shaped exactly who I am, everything that I've done in business now. I started out, in 1988. And it was such a great time in my life. I was 22 years old, started out as a real estate agent. And, I was, full of energy and young and enthusiastic, but I didn't know what to do. I mean, so I started cold calling. That's what they teach you to do. And I got that idea from reading a book. And, it taught me the importance of focusing on the no's, because the no's are what lead to the yeses. And, I learned this whole process of it being about disciplined, getting myself in position to do the cold calling every day. I was making 100 cold calls a day. And when I really look at it, man, it was such an amazing time. And some of the games that I had to play with myself, first of all, you had to overcome the initial call reluctance. But after you make your first 10 calls, you're kind of used to it. You're seeing what's going to happen. It's not the end of the world. Nobody's going to kill you or bite your head off or anything like that. And then it's just repetition. This is doing reps and getting good at learning how people react to certain tonalities and bringing your personality out on the phone. And I got really good at it. But I realized very quickly that it was a hamster wheel. And this is where I started looking for other solutions. And I've always been an avid reader, but the first book that really changed the way I think about things was a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I remember reading this book and feeling exactly like I was hitting that ceiling of complexity, that thing where I was a one-man business that was, dependent on me, and I was constantly working in my business. If I wasn't making the cold calls, nothing was happening. I wasn't getting the whole machine would stop because I was the engine that was driving it. And when I read this and I thought, this is the frustration that most business owners run into. Most businesses are started by what Michael Gerber calls technicians, not entrepreneurs. Technicians are people who they do something and they start a business to do that thing that they do without a boss, except they realize very quickly that they're the boss. And as Michael says, they're working for a lunatic. And so I really got on a deep level the concept of the franchise prototype. That's where I was introduced to that concept, was in this book. And to me, what I look at as the franchise prototype is just this concept of building something with a plan or an expectation to duplicate it 5,000 times. And he uses McDonald's as the example of the most successful small business in the world. And the success of McDonald's is based on that you can go to any McDonald's in the world and you can have exactly the same experience because they've got systems that are duplicatable. Now, that was what Ray Kroc, to his credit, really went when he took over the McDonald's business from the McDonald's brothers. He really focused on working on the business, not on working in it, on getting better at doing the things, but doing it in a way that creates the systems that can help other people, ordinary people, what as Michael refers to them, achieve extraordinary results. And that way you don't depend on extraordinary people. If a business is going to grow, you've got to be able to set up a process that ordinary people can get extraordinary results. So you work on solving the problems. And how I applied that, if I look back at the impact of this book on my life, on how I've done everything, I went to work on how can I create assets for my business that can work while I'm not working? And so in a very short period of time, I created, instead of making 100 cold calls, I was also introduced at the same time to the concept of direct response marketing. And some of these books will overlap. So I say that, this book was impactful, but what was the catalyst for it then was reading Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But so I started applying this concept of creating something that could be duplicated 5,000 times with my real estate business. And I created a guide to Halton Hills house prices. I was living in Halton Hills, just outside of Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area there, and it was an area where people were moving, but there wasn't a lot of access to information. When you start thinking about this is pre-internet, the only way to get information was to really come out and see what Halton Hills was about. So I created this guide to Halton Hills real estate prices, and I created an ad that I could run there was a real estate publication that covered the entire west side of Toronto, all the suburbs. And so I put in the Guide to Halton Hills ad on there, and I put a little coupon, no internet, remember, a little order coupon that people could fill in and fax to me or mail to me. And I used to get in my mailbox, people would fill in the coupon to get the guide, or they would fax it in, or I had set up a recorded message for them. And that was one of the most amazingly freeing experiences that I had, because everything I was doing about that was thinking about how could I duplicate this 5,000 times. And so when I had that system up and running, it was amazing because I was generating all these leads without having to make any cold calls. People were coming to me. I was continuing to mail them every 2 weeks when the new MLS catalog came, all the new listings that were available in Halton Hills, and people would reply or call me when they wanted to come out and look at homes. So it was 100% system driven, not me discipline driven, not me getting on the phone and drumming up business and making phone calls. I was leveraging for the first time things that where I could put words on paper and get people to call me. And I was fully immersed on this. I was like a drug. I mean, I was an addict from the moment that I got exposed to it. And so very quickly I started I did a postcard to send to apartments that would get people to ask for a book on buying their first home. I created all of these things. I did a TV show on our local public access television called Six Steps to Home Ownership. And I would run those things. Everything that I was doing was set up so that I could duplicate myself. That's the first step here, is to create things that are going to have a life after I'm done with it. So creating the guide, creating the ad for the guide, the postcard, the newsletter that I would send to the people who asked for information on the house prices, creating the TV show and the Six Steps to Home Ownership guide. All of those things were assets that I was working on, and I was creating something that would work without me. Now, the frame that you have to overcome is that you have to unhook from the immediate payoff of working in the business. And so when I was making the cold calls, it felt like that was doing something that was going to have an immediate payoff. I could get on the phone, I could call 100 people, and I may find somebody who's ready to sell their house right now, or somebody who's very close to looking to buy a house. So it feels like I'm in the game and I'm doing something that's going to have a result today. And that's true, but it's very short-term lived because there's no equity in it. There's no asset that you've built from it. If it doesn't work out that way, now I've got to get on the phone and do it again. I've got to continue to do it to make that work. So the first shift in my mind was realizing that, okay, working on this guide is not going to have an immediate payoff. Like, I had to put hours into laying out the guide, into deciding which pictures I was going to put in the guide, going out and taking all the pictures for represented what you could get in Halton Hills in 60 pictures. And I had to take all the way from the condos and the townhomes and the semi-detached and the detached homes and all the way up to the luxury homes to give people an arc of what you could get for your money in Halton Hills. Now, I knew that this was going to, once I was done with it, have a life that's going to live on beyond the effort that I'm putting in right now. Often I would describe it as the difference between renting and owning, right? You're renting something when you're just doing it and then you leave, it's done. But when you own something, you're building equity. So the effort that I was putting in now, I owned a guide to Halton Hills house prices that was packaged up and an asset that I could now work on, and again, on creating an ad for this that I could run. I'm not getting paid immediately for any of that work. And that's why it's frustrating or confusing for people who are used to working in their business to get the result. It's almost like you have to take a step back to be able to now invest that time in like an asset that you have, that you're making an investment of allocating time to creating assets that are going to pay off years and years down the road. And that's exactly what it did. When I ran that system for my own business with tremendous success, I was able to do way more business in way less time, bring in other people to help me with that, and really look, because of the E-Myth, thinking about it as a business. And then the great shift for me, the thing that got me on the path to where I am today, goes definitely through now putting together a guide called Toronto and Beyond, 40 Great Places to Live Within an Hour of the City, where I licensed that same model that I had created for me in Halton Hills to 40 real estate agents around Toronto in all of these areas. And some of them are still the most successful realtors in their marketplaces and still using these kind of systems years later. So that got me to the point where I had a duplicatable system. And that was my first sort of look into that. And so that's all based on this idea from the E-Myth of creating something with an eye on working on it, on duplicating it 5,000 times. I'd say you should read it. I mean, it's a great book if you haven't read that one. Next up is this right here, The Abraham Method by J. Abraham, arrived in my mailbox unannounced. And I found out later it's because I had bought a Tony Robbins program. If you remember, Tony Robbins in the late 80s, early 90s was all over television with unlimited power. And, I bought the unlimited power program, and I found out, if I look at this, I just think about the seeds of things in your life. And if I look back, this is one of my most treasured possessions right here, the Abraham Method. When I hold this in my hand here, this is something, first of all, I'd never gotten anything so kind of beautiful. I look at this, the paper quality here. This is like a really thick cardboard linen with white embossed lettering on here. How to multiply your business results while reducing your time, risk, and effort. And it's, there's, I don't know how many pages, maybe 36 pages of 8.5 by 11 pages here. And I would study this, and, the concepts that I was introduced to from J. Abraham, he talks about the marketing concepts they won't teach you at Harvard Business School. And I can't tell you how often I read. I've used these or, shaped something from these. But the first concept that he has is people are silently begging to be led. They're crying out to know more about a business's product or service. If you have unanswered questions about a product, you're less likely to buy it. And so I learned this process of educating your prospects and giving them all the information that they need so that you can lead them to the conclusion that you need them to come to in order to decide that this is the right thing to do. Advertising is nothing more than salesmanship. That's concept number 4 that I learned from Jay. Advertising via radio, television, magazines, and direct mail should all be constructed and implemented in the same demanding way a salesman makes a pitch to a prospective customer. And I love this whole concept here. And I think, when you talk about not knowing where the seeds of something are going to go, I look at this and, Jay Abraham's a dear friend. Tony Robbins is a friend. I've played golf with Tony. I've been on his Money Masters program where we text, memes or fun stuff. And this is all that path started from these little seeds of knowledge that came from reading these books. So when I look at the Abraham Method from J. Abraham, one of the concepts that really helped me the most was this idea of risk reversal. And he really explained it well. He was the first to tell the story about 2 men trying to sell a horse. And the daughters, wanted a horse, and one man came to the gentleman and said, try this horse, and if you don't like it, come back and I'll give you back your money. And, that's an interesting thing. It seems like that's a nice offer. But then he told the story of another man came and said, well, your daughter wants a horse. I've got a horse that I think would be perfect for her, but I would say that because it's my horse. But we won't know that until the horse, your daughter meets the horse, she rides the horse, see how they gel. So let me bring the horse to you. and I'll bring some oats and feed for the horse to let your daughter try the horse. And then I'll come back in 30 days. And if you like the horse, you can keep the horse and pay me then, or I'll take the horse away and hopefully you'll find a horse that's the right horse for you. And just it's an amazing thing when you really think about that whole situation, that I learned the difference between risk reduction and risk reversal. Money back guarantees are a risk reduction. You're saying, give me the money, and if you don't like it, I'll give you back the money, which if you take me at my word, that's reducing your risk because you know, okay, he was upstanding businessman, you can get your money back. But it's not the same as the complete risk reversal of, let me bring the horse to you, let me bring the oats and feed for the horse, and you try it, and then I'll come back, and if you like it, then you can pay me, and if not, I'll take it away. I'm 100% at risk that I'm putting the onus on the horse being suitable for your daughter. And that lesson has gone so far for me. You know, I've used that in so many ways and still do. I always look at one of the best ways that you can bring on a new customer, especially if you've got a service that is a recurring service or an ongoing service where the lifetime value of a customer is going to be a lot over a long period of time. It's not just a one-off thing where you're only going to do it one time in your life. Sometimes the very best way to reverse somebody's risk is to give them the opportunity to experience what you have and let them get a result for that, and then let them pay. Now, I say this stuff like it's been such a big game changer for me, and often it's almost something that you can't dabble in a way. It's something that you've got to have. The barrier to entry of it is you've got to have something that's transformative. You got to have something that people are going to love and that they're going to get a result. And if you have that, it's so much easier to give people that experience first. It's been one of the, if there's any way possible in a situation that I can give somebody a free experience of it that will lead to the next step, to lead to them logically wanting to continue and us having a lifetime relationship, that starts at the very beginning. So I've done lots of things like gift cards, to give people a gift card to try something for the first time, to give somebody a free experience of something where they're going to get a result, they're going to have a benefit. I talk a lot about the Mosquito Authority as an example there. You know, we used a concept of giving somebody a free mosquito treatment because it's something that people are reluctant about. They've been duped before in other promises of no mosquitoes. You've tried the citronella candles, they've tried the bug zappers, they've tried the radio wave things, and none of it gets rid of the mosquitoes. But the Mosquito Authority has a process that when they treat your yard, you literally are mosquito free. I've experienced it myself in my courtyard at my house here. It used to be mosquitoes everywhere, but when they come, the mosquitoes are gone. Now, I know that if people who have a mosquito problem, and if you live anywhere in the Southeast or anywhere in the Northeast in the summer time, you know that mosquitoes are there and they're a nuisance. But they can also kill you. And that's a reality that people need to face. But having an experience of knowing that mosquitoes bite and they're a nuisance is one thing. To then convince people to try your service because you're promising that, hey, we'll get you, there's no mosquitoes in your yard. And so that is people still have to overcome the obstacle of giving you the money first. And I really, on observing this, and I've used it so many ways, I can't, I could do a whole, 3-hour class just on the different ways that we've used risk reversal. Maybe I'll make a note of that and do some more examples of it. But in doing this, thinking this way, one of the things that I learned, I came up with some truths about giving people an experience, a risk reversed result in advance, is that sometimes it's less expensive to get somebody a result than it is to convince them to give you money to get the result. Now, I thought about those words for a little while, how to phrase that, but the reality is that sometimes it's less expensive to get somebody a result. And what I mean by that is, if you've got something that is a recurring thing, if somebody's got a lifetime value of thousands of dollars with you over the life of their business, and your first experience, if it's a monthly thing like mosquito control, is that once somebody gets it and they have an experience of it, they want to keep it. They have a tremendous renewal rate year after year. But getting people over the hump of trying it is a big hurdle. And sometimes it's less expensive, and this is one of those situations, to give somebody the treatment. Because what does it cost you? What's your incremental cost to give somebody the first experience to confirm that what you're saying is real on you? What if you took the risk that person is going to get the result that you're promising, and you take the burden of taking on that risk for them? So to deliver, even if the treatment is $79 per treatment, the actual cost of it may only be $20. And in this case, that's about right. That, if you're willing to give somebody $20, to risk $20 to get a person to have an experience of your promise of what you're offering, and then that 1 in 3 of them are going to turn into a customer that has, thousands of dollars of lifetime value, it's way less expensive to invest that $60 to get a customer that's going to be worth thousands of dollars to you in the long run. And so that's one of the ways to use something like that. And I think that what I really found on that is that, the second truth about it, first of all, that sometimes it's less expensive to give somebody a result than it is to convince them to pay you money to get the result, is that you actually only have to deliver less result than what you have to promise to convince them to give you the money. And so it's so often, you don't have to really flower things up or to, go through that experience when you can just let the result speak for itself. And that's an amazing thing. And the third thing that works on this is that people are far less attached to future money than they are to present money. So if you give somebody an experience of something, give them something that they can get the result now and pay later, it's so great, And so you look back over history, so many things in your own buying history, you look at it, that what would be, how many things have you bought because you had an opportunity to experience them first? And there's many ways to give people that free experience, whether it's a gift card. We'd use my girlfriend's studio here in Winter Haven. It's called Amazing Brows and Lashes. And we built her whole business on giving people $100 gift card towards microblading, doing the permanent eyebrows. And it's a, $400 or $500 procedure. Rather than giving people 20% off on something, we give them $100. And that's a real thing. People feel very differently about getting a gift card than they do about getting 20% off on something. That works for restaurants. If you give somebody a $20 gift card to come into your restaurant, your actual real cost on that could be $5. When you take just the food costs into consideration, you've already got the restaurant, you've already got the space, you've already got the capacity. People are already being paid to be there. It's really just the incremental cost of the food that you have. So looking at your situation, what could you do to give people that first experience there, And knowing that can lead to many things. Another concept that I rely on and that I use from Jay Abraham is this idea of concentric circles. He told a story in the Abraham method here about how he built a gold dealer by offering people a particular coin for $19 that was actually worth more than it cost them $30 or something for this $19 coin. So they would let people buy just this one little coin, knowing that within the pool of people who would buy one $19 coin, that there would be some number of them who would buy $1,000 worth of gold. And within them, there would be some pool of people who would buy $100,000 worth of gold. But it started out with the lowest, the minimum viable commitment. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that concept by just starting with something simple. And so we're now, and it's evolving, even in reviewing these things, I'm constantly evolving it. We were starting with Luba. We built her business, got thousands of people on a list by offering that $100 gift card. And now we're going in a new direction. We've got thousands of people for microblading. She's got all of these expensive machines in her studio for doing all these high-end facials. And we're doing now giving people a free facial. Now, the cost of doing a facial is a basic facial is very little. It's just the staff time. She's already got the machines. She's already got the stuff. So to give somebody a facial, and while they're there, while they're going through the facial, they're getting an education about their skin type, about all of the different machines, all the different options that are available for the types of facials that they can get, and a offer then to get a series of facials or join the facial membership program, but all starting with getting in front of people who want a free facial. Now, that's a big thing because we know that list is going to be very valuable over a long period of time, and that's taking a capital investment approach to this rather than an expense-based approach of running ads and trying to get people to ring the cash register right away before the credit card bill is due. So that, thank you to Jay Abraham for this. He's been one of the most impactful people in my life. And, but again, knowing the stuff, just knowing and reading things is not going to be as valuable to you as reading and applying things. Having an experience of something leads to your own thinking. Now, I've taken that foundation and I've built on that and built my own methodologies, my own ways of thinking about things that I still use to this day. So that is a tremendous book. Anything that Jay Abraham has, I would highly recommend. Next up on my bookshelf is a book called The Discipline of Market Leaders by Michael Tracy and Fred Wiersma. Now, this book was written, I'm going foundational here for you. Oh my goodness, you're not going to believe this. Look what I found. Oh my goodness, I didn't even know this was in here. Okay, so look at this. This is the original ad for the Guide to Halton Hills. Wow. That's so amazing to me. I had that discovered in there. So there it is. Now you can discover the Halton Hills real estate market from the comfort of your own living room. I can't believe that I found this. I've been looking for this. Here's somebody, Sylvia, who had filled out the coupon and mailed this back to me to get the Guide to Halton Hills. But there was a picture of the guide there. If you're just starting to look for a home in Halton Hills, this book could be very helpful. It's a comprehensive guide to the Halton Hills real estate market. There are 60 different pictures of the most common home styles in both Georgetown and Acton with descriptions and price ranges. So when you're driving through these neighborhoods, you'll know about how much the houses generally sell for. It's like having the teacher's edition of your high school algebra book. There are maps of Georgetown, Acton, and Halton Hills so you can find your way around. I've also included important telephone numbers that you may need, like schools, municipal offices, and utilities. When you request your guide, you will receive, if you'd like, information on homes that are currently for sale and a subscription to our Market Watch newsletter, which gives you bi-weekly market updates and the latest real estate news. This service is provided free and there's no obligation. Call today and get your home search started on the right track. Clip and mail the coupon below or call 1-800 for your free guide. That one, can you believe that I found? That I had no idea that was in there. This is like one of the most joyful moments for me here. So there it is. That's proof positive there of exactly what I was talking about. I'm going to put that straight to the pool room, as James Stramko would say. So the discipline of market leaders, not only with the treasures of having something inside there, also was a tremendous book for me. And I was looking to see when it was written. So it was written in, 1995. The early 90s was such an important pivotal part in my development because that's when I was like fully, and I've never gotten out of student mode, but these are the foundational things that really shaped the way that I think about things. So the discipline of market leaders, that's where I learned this concept of specialization and the ways that different businesses succeed in the market. And they looked at all of these market leading companies and they found 3 distinct ways that people lead within any market. And the first was what they call product leadership, meaning they led the market by creating the very best product. So that's like, if you look at the time they were talking about Nike, how we might talk now about Apple. That Apple is a product leadership company, that they have the best products in the category. They sell at premium prices. People demand the products. It's all the things that people want. Sometimes they don't even need to do the marketing because the product is so good that people seek it out and that's what they want. So that is one. The next is what they call operationally excellent leaders. So operational excellence is a second category of leadership for these big businesses. And that is a example of a company like Walmart. Walmart is 100% driven by its operational excellence. This is especially true if you're going to be the low cost leader in something, you need to embrace operational excellence to drive down the cost so that you can maintain your margins and do things at the highest volume. And that's what Walmart has done. And the third type of business is, or market leader, are what they call customer intimate companies. And these customer intimate companies are companies that focus 100% on blending with their clients so that it would be difficult to see where they start and where they end. And so you look at companies, the examples that they use are, and some of these are companies that you've never heard of, but they look at some of the management companies that manage hospitals, and they staff and operate the hospitals within that framework. So they become a part of that hospital, and they're in charge of that particular part of it. And you look at companies that do that same kind of thing in logistics, where, for a long time, Amazon and UPS have had a long-term relationship where UPS is integrated completely into their system so that they're able to deliver all of the logistics that they have and create an amazing outcome for people. And as I started reading this, I had my real estate business. I was 100% focused on real estate at the time. So everything I was reading, I was looking through that lens of how does this apply to my real estate business? And I started thinking, so what is this? And this is the genesis, the very genesis of the idea of thinking about the thinking that led to the before unit, the during unit, and the after unit. Because what I realized was that the real estate business and all businesses that I've realized since are really have elements of all three of those in them. And I thought about the before unit is the product leadership division of your business, that you're creating demand, you're creating something to find people. So you're constantly coming up with new lead generation books, with the guide to Halton Hills, with whatever it is to get people to raise their hand. The during unit of the business is operational excellence, that you're always going to be, even if you are a product leadership, so you're getting the word out about your business. The operational excellent portion of your business is the during unit. Is how do you organize the systems to deliver the experience for people? How do you continue to grow and to do that at a higher and higher level while maintaining the experience that people are getting? And that's all driven by operational excellence. And then I realized that the customer intimate portion of the real estate business is really about nurturing lifetime relationships with people. It's the relationships that you have with your existing customers, with your existing clients. Jay Abraham talks about that idea too, of lifetime relationships with people, of taking on, and I've often used this mindset, and you've heard it even on the podcasts that I do, of taking this idea of under management, assets under management, homes under management, with my electrician friend, panels under management. When you start looking at whatever it is that the category that you fit in, what if you're taking that you're managing that portion of their world for a long-term relationship, and you're very customer intimate, so that in any need that they have, that you're going to be the one that provides that. So that is an amazing book. Now, a lot of these books, I read these and reread them, and then it may be years since when I picked them up, but I can trace back the ideas. And sometimes when you open up the books, you get treasures. I was so excited to find that guide to Halton Hills ad there. So that's a real find. So dust off your bookshelf. If you've had books that have been impactful, stick with them. Continue to reread them and see. You never step in the same river twice, they say. So I look at that, and you never kind of read the same book twice the same way because you're a different person. You've had different experiences. Things, land differently, and you have a great insight that you get because of an experience that you had when you cross-reference it with another book that you read. So next on my bookshelf, and these aren't in any particular order, but they're kind of in the order of when I started reading. These are all like the early and mid 90s edition here. And I'm not a big fan of Dusk Jackets, so this one doesn't have one, but this is a book called How to Argue and Win Every Time by Jerry Spence. And talk about a great book title, Jerry is a very famous attorney, never lost a case. He's, high profile. You probably saw him on CNN in the past as a legal analyst. He had the cowboy hat, lives out in Montana, the leather jacket with the tassels and a, deep booming voice, just a real orator. And this book, by the way, the audiobook of this is fantastic. This book has some of the most amazing lessons that I've used. What he talks about is understanding, we think about arguing. We think about as fighting. We think about that we're bickering, we're going back and forth. But when you think about what an argument is, which is what the legal profession is built on, it's what the sales world is built on. You're presenting an argument, trying to win over the opinion of the jury, the person who's judging this idea. They're going to make a conclusion that your idea, your product, your service is the right thing for them. That's how I looked at this. And one of the most important lessons that came out of this book is the idea of telling the truth. And that's an interesting thing, even when it seems like it's counterproductive. Jay Abraham talks about that. Also, that a damaging admission or letting people, when you're vulnerable, when you are laying your cards on the table, when you're letting people in behind the scenes, giving people a reason why something is happening, you're letting them come to the conclusion that this is the right thing and that it feels like they are winning. And it's okay when you let your ego go, and it's not about beating somebody into submission and making them wrong. It's about leading them to the right conclusion that is exactly the conclusion that you want them to come to, but it's their idea. So it's very nuanced, and reading the book will help a lot because he tells lots of stories about it. Like the one that really struck me was talking about trying to convince a friend to try some possum stew. I think it was possum stew. And, you think like even just that, I'm not that interested in possum stew. And, most people think you'd start, arguing with people, you should try this possum stew. It's awesome. You're not going to believe how great it tastes. And the whole, going that way, trying to convince them to try it. And they're not going to try it. The more you argue for your way, the more people are going to resist, right? When you're arguing overtly about something and trying to immediately get them to come to a conclusion, it's a very different thing. So he talks about how he would do it. Is he would start, making up the stew and boiling up the stew and letting the odor, letting the smell come up and people going, oh, let them out. What's that? This is possum stew. And letting them, smell that. It smells delicious. My grandmother's recipe. And then telling all the ingredients. It's got all the things in it and tasting it and being delighted with the taste and not immediately trying to get them to try it. You got to try this, is bringing to the point where they're wanting to taste this stew because it smells so delicious. You look so pleased about it. Well, can I try it? Now, that's a very different thing than trying to beat somebody over the head of trying to see things your way. And so how I used this, and I've used it again and again and again, but the very first way that I used this was in selling homes. And I, loved this concept of telling the truth and kind of putting down your guard and letting people in on what's going on for you, and that people will rally to support you. We're humans first, and we want to feel empathy. We want to help people. And so I was working with a real estate developer in Toronto, and he had a development up in Muskoka, which was kind of cottage country, a couple hours outside of the city. And the summer season is the time for cottage country. It's when people go up. They spend the whole, June, July, August up at the cottage, and by Labor Day, it's kind of winding down, and everybody's back to the fall, back to school, and the season's kind of over, and people, board up their cottages, or maybe they make a couple of trips in the fall, but board them up for the winter and then come back in the spring. And so I had lunch with him on Labor Day, day after Labor Day, and he was a little bit disappointed that he hadn't been able to sell these last 6 lots that he had in this development that he'd been, his family and they'd been developing for years. And he felt like, oh man, now I'm going to have to wait till next year to sell them. He'd been trying to sell them with these big, ads that said 33% off, blowout sale, like all of this. And I asked him about based on what, what is this 33% off of? Is that based on your inflated, asking price before that you've reduced it by 33%? And because there's so much of telling the truth in this and creating authority, giving people evidence that something is a good deal, because 33% off just doesn't sound like it's anything specific. And so he said, no, this is like legitimately 33% off of what the real value of them is. And so I suggested that we get the lots appraised, like get an official appraisal. So that's something that is evidence, irrefutable evidence, right? That you're building your case that these are legitimately of value. So he had them appraised. He was willing to sell them for 33% below their appraised value because he had the last 6 of these lots. He'd sold all the other lots over all the years, but this was just like pure profit for him. And he was going to use that money to make a balloon payment on another development, but he needed to sell these lots to get that opportunity to do it. And he had to do it before November 1st. So I put together an ad, and this is the first ad that I did like this. And I put a picture of one of the view from the lots, and the headline on the ad in quotations was, I need to sell these last 6 Muskoka home sites in the next 30 days, and I'm willing to sell them for 33% below their current September 96 appraised value. And we went on to tell the story of the situation. Looks like a newspaper article, like a profile type of thing, but it was written in his voice addressing the one buyer who might be interested in buying one of these lots. So we said, my name is Don Naylor. I've been developing this property in Muskoka for several years. I've got these last 6 home sites, and here's my dilemma. And I got those words from Jerry here of, when you're presenting something, well, here's my dilemma. And, now that I think about it, Chris Voss in his book, Never Split the Difference, it's kind of like how am I supposed to do that? It's kind of like this same thing, putting people in the situation where you're just presenting the situation and let them try and solve the problem. So here's my dilemma. I've got these last 6 home sites left. I also have a property that I'd like to have an opportunity to make a balloon payment on another property that I'd like to develop. But in order to do that, I need the money from these lots to do that. And so here's what I'm willing to do. I had these lots appraised. this month, like so September 96, and they all range in size from 1 acre to 5 acres. And here's the price ranges of them. And I am going to be up at the property on Saturday and Sunday, both days this weekend at 2 p.m. sharp. If you call my office and give a recorded message, and I'll fax you or send you all the information about the lots. And so we ran that ad one time in the Toronto Sun, and we sold all 6 of those lots over the next 2 weekends because we're offering something that was legitimately a value. He couldn't believe. He thought by the end of Labor Day that the whole season was over. He called me the day the ad landed in the newspaper and said, our phone's ringing off the hook and our fax machine is burning up because our printer's burning up from printing all these packages to send to people. But he went up and he met them and sold all of the lots over the next 2 weekends. And so he was thrilled, and I was hooked on this. And I started, when you have like a new hammer, everything's a nail. I started using this for lots of all the homes that I was selling. I was looking for the story of them and telling the story in an unguarded way to present your side of this, but let people come to the conclusion. And so, having that as a framework, I've used that model again, and we still use it to this day, of telling the truth and telling the story. So I used it with another client, Tim and Darlene. They had a townhouse to sell, and we put a picture of the townhouse and said, we need to sell our Kings Mill townhouse this weekend, and we're willing to sell it for $5,000 below its current appraised value. And went and told the story. My name's Tim Alberts. My wife and I have lived in Georgetown for 3 years, and it's always been our dream to live in the country. And last weekend we found the house of our dreams. And then here's our dilemma. And then laid out what the situation was. We found the house. We put in an offer. We had to make it conditional on selling our house, and we've only got 30 days to do it. So we need to sell it before somebody else buys it. And if we had time, we would list our house for $147,500, and it'd probably sell for $145,000. And here's how we know this, and told the whole story, but we don't have the time. So we're listing it at $139,000. We're willing to sell it for $139,500. And we're having an open house on Saturday or Sunday at 2 p.m. And then we'll be accepting offers after that. So we ran the ad. We got all of these people coming to the house at the same time, and we ended up selling the house for $148,000. It sold for more than what they would have expected to sell for, because people realize this is a legitimate, beautiful townhouse in a beautiful location with an amazing view, and it's worth it. And we gave people a winning story to tell the stakeholders in their life. And that was the lesson that I really got from this, is so much of it is about letting other people feel like a winner, letting them feel like they've won. And that's an amazing outcome, that when you think about people buying a home, there's so many stakeholders, especially young people buying their first home. They don't want to make a mistake. And people are very judgy about real estate decisions. And everybody, you don't know, it's such a subjective thing, market value. So you imagine that they've got to go, and they say they bought this house, but they've got to explain it to the family at Thanksgiving, and Uncle Leo, the real estate expert in the family, is going to be, you're crazy. You paid this much for this. Like, you tell the story of it. But when you get to tell the story of we got this house. This couple needed to sell. We were able to swoop in. We were able to get the house because they needed to get the house sold to get their thing. Now they look like the hero. They look like a winner. You can't argue with that. Uncle Leo would have to agree. Boy, you're lucky you got in the right time. So making people feel like they're winning is a great thing, especially if you can realize, it's almost like your parents, maybe your little brother you're playing games and you know that you could beat your little brother, but your parent tells you, let him win one, and then you let him win and he feels so excited about it, and your parents are winking at you that that so he feels like a winner, but you feel like a winner too. It protects your ego. And it's a big thing. I mean, I always tell, we look at situations like that, especially in real estate, and we say, you're either going to tell a winning story or a losing story. And a story is going to be told, right? A story is going to be told about this. They're going to make up their own story and tell it, or you can direct the narrative by telling the story yourself. And there are winning stories and losing stories. A winning story is, we need to sell our house and we're moving to Poughkeepsie and we've got to be there by the end of the month. That would be a winning story, right? But people get married to their losing stories of, we're not giving the house away, or we put a lot into this. If they want it, they can pay they're going to pay the price. Or the house down the street sold, our house is worth more. You start telling yourself stories that are going to limit the opportunities that you have in the market. And so getting yourself to think from the other person's perspective and skillfully craft an argument, meaning a step-by-step path with evidence of the thought pattern that somebody would have to go through to arrive at the conclusion that I need to buy this house, or I need to buy this product, or I need to buy this service over all the others. Thinking like a chess master, or as Jerry Spence, thinking like a master attorney who's building an argument and presenting your case to the jury to persuade them that your way of thinking, and when it comes time to make their verdict, that the verdict is in your favor. So I would definitely read that book and listen to the audiobook, because the audiobook of this is done in Jerry's voice and it's amazing. Next up on my bookshelf is a book that you've probably never heard of. The only other person that I know that has this book that I've seen in the wild without talking about it is my friend Dr. Harlan Kilstein. He has a copy of this Handbook of Direct Mail, and everybody else that I know that has it because I told them about it. Ross O'Loughlin, I'm talking to you. This book is from Germany. Siegfried Vogel is a direct mail, master. And this book tells all of the methodology that they use to have tremendous success with direct mail. And I learned so many things that are directly applicable to things that I'm doing today because of this book. It's very rare, very hard to find. If you look on Amazon, I would do it right now while you're listening or while you're watching this, because it'll be gone if there is any of them when people hear this. So get this one. I would recommend it. A couple of the things that I learned from this. He talks about the dialogue method of direct written sales communication. And I found this book so fascinating because it's a master class. There's lots of illustrations, and he's written out all the principles of this. And one of the most powerful things that I learned from this is something that he calls the silent dialogue. He got into this part of playing the role of the other person, what's going on in the mind of people when they're receiving direct mail. And he started, you think about it comes in the mail and you look at it and the first thought is, what's this? And then they did these by studying people and like forensically looking at how are you looking at this? What are you saying? They're doing eye tracking studies and asking them overtly, what's the question here? So things like, what is this? And who is this from? And is it for me? Looking at the thing, and then is it important? And Gary Halbert talks about that idea of the A pile and the B pile in direct mail. That the A pile is we're sorting our mail over the garbage can, and the A pile is stuff that looks important, looks like it's personally for me, or looks like it's a bill or something that I definitely need. The B pile is things that look like maybe they're trying to sell me something, or it looks like junk mail. So when you start looking at directing the flow of the narrative that's going on in people's minds, this helps you break up the steps that you need somebody to take. So I have this was before email, by the way, but the lessons in here have driven most of what I do in email. They've really led to the thought of this dialogue method of thinking about communications as a dialogue more than a monologue. And, back in the day, direct mail and sales letters were really sort of, you had one shot. You had to get your whole thing out. You had to build all the evidence, do everything in that envelope and get somebody to make a decision and write a check and send it to you to get whatever product that you were selling. But now with email and websites and online things, the lesson that I learned from this is applied in a way that I talk about as communicating to one person at a time and knowing baby steps that I don't need to. Well, I'll give you the perfect example. And I didn't learn this exactly in the book, but I developed it through my understanding of the principles in this book. So he talks about the idea of every word that you write in any communication is either an amplifier of the message that you're trying to convey, or it's a filter that is reducing the message that you are, or the outcome that you're looking to get. So if I look at how I do my breakthrough blueprint events, I do every month, basically nine times a year. I do a 3-day marketing event, a workshop at a boardroom table with, 10 or 12 people. And we spend 3 days focused on applying the 8 profit activators to your business. It's my favorite thing. I'm in my 11th year of doing this process, and I've used the exact same email sequence and dialogue to fill these events all over the world, from Orlando, Toronto, London, Amsterdam, Sydney, California, all over. And the method that I use is directly linked all the way back to this, where I know that I'm communicating to one person. So I know when people, instead of sorting through their mail, they're sorting through their inbox and they're looking and seeing this whole dialogue. What's this? What's in it for me? Is this for me? And that's why making an email that feels like it's only going to one person is the most powerful thing. It's tricky to do, but it's also the most valuable thing that you can do. So the combination of presenting an argument like Jerry Spence talks about in a way that Siegfried Vogel talks about is a powerful combination. So I send emails that are only meant for one person. And this dialogue method allows me to see the entire arc and know that I don't have to get the whole thing into one communication. I know that the outcome that I want is baby steps. So for instance, I'll give you the backstory of how I do my event marketing. So if you're on my list, maybe you've seen these emails come through. And same email for 11 years, 9 times a year, I'll say to people, it'll say Orlando Marketing Workshop. All amplifiers, no filters. It's just the generic, it's just charge neutral. Orlando Marketing Workshop. Every one of those has weight. I'm not trying to convince you to come to Orlando. I'm just saying that's what this email is about, because that's the dialogue that people are having. What's this about? Orlando Marketing Workshop. Okay, open it up. Now, the first words are their name. Hi, Dean. I'm holding a 3-day marketing workshop in Orlando, and we're going to spend 3 days focused on applying the 8 profit activators to your business. Would you like to join us? That's it. That's the whole thing. All I want right now is I want to just identify the people who are philosophically or intrigued or interested in that idea. Now, those are amplifiers. If that's something that you want, we're going to spend 3 days. It's a small group. It's with me. We're going to focus on applying the 8 profit activators to your business. So that sounds like a really valuable thing to do in a small group. So I'm conveying that to people in a way that if that sounds interesting to you, then let me know, right? Because now I know that the replies to that are going to come in the form of, that sounds great, or, oh, tell me more, or when is it, or how much is it? All of those things are filters. So if I were to say in the email, it's on these dates, that is a filter, because that may be something that would block people. I'm going to be in Aruba that week, or I can't make it that week. So they don't respond, and I don't know that they would have been interested in that, right? All I want to know is who among all the people on my list are philosophically interested in the idea of coming to spend 3 days with me and focus 100% on applying everything to their business, full immersion. So if I were to say when it is, how much it is, those are filters that people might say, if they see without the context of what we're doing, when it is or how much it is, they may be able to filter themselves out and say, oh, I can't afford that, or I'm unavailable on those dates. I want to get all of the people that love the idea of spending 3 days with me focused on their business. Now, through the dialogue method, now I'm able to send an email that gives them all the details about it. So I'll reply and say, hey, Dean, thanks for connecting. Here's what I'm doing in Orlando. I'm going to spend 3 days in a small group, 10 or 12 people, and we're going to focus on applying each one of the 8 profit activators to business. We're going to focus on your target market selection. We're going to focus on lead generating. We're going to talk about conversion sequences. We're going to multiply every client that you work with. We're going to talk about orchestrating referrals and building lifetime relationships with people. It's a small group event, very interactive. It's at Orlando at the Celebration Hotel. These are the dates that we're doing it. It would be super if you could come. It's $5,000, and you don't need to do anything right now. Just let me know if you're in, and I'll save you a spot. P.S. As soon as you decide, I'll give you access to the Breakthrough Blueprint online so you can go through the program before we get together. Now, that that whole email, both of those emails fit on one page of 8.5 by 11 paper. I know that because I've printed out 3 versions of that for part of my email mastery program and my lead conversion apps as examples to show. So that two-step process of the short emails is using this direct model and focusing on filters and amplifiers. Now, subtly, what's happening in there in the second email, once I give them all the dates and things, is I ask them not go here to register and pull out your credit card and go through the whole registration process. But I just say, you don't have to do anything right now. Just reply and let me know you're in, and I'll save you a spot. And so I get all of these emails from people saying, I'm in. That's all we're looking for. That's all I want. It's the equivalent of one-click ordering. It's like I'm separating the logic from the logistics. I'm separating the decision from the mechanics, right? That they've decided that they're going to come. I want to know as soon as they've decided that. And they can do that, while they're sitting waiting for a friend to come for lunch, or while they're sitting in a restaurant. They're not going to pull out their credit card and go to an order form and fill out everything right there. But while they're checking their email real quick, they can just reply, I'm in. And that feels like they've made the decision and it's settled. And then that sets a whole thing in motion that I'll talk about in the next book here. But that whole process is millions of dollars. I've done 11 years of sending that same 1-2 email sequence to speak to people who are at the point where they're ready to come and spend time with me. And by the way, that whole model depends on that people are educated and motivated enough that they already know that would be a good idea. Right? By doing podcasts like this. I've been doing podcasts for 12 years, more than that. Since 2006, I've been doing podcasts, but talk specifically about the I Love Marketing podcast and More Cheese, Less Whiskers and Listing Agent Lifestyle. All of these podcasts that are 100% just giving and sharing marketing concepts with people to educate and motivate them so that they're already convinced. I'm not trying to convince people to come spend 3 days with me in Orlando. I'm inviting people who are already convinced that would be a good idea. They know that because they've gotten value from this listening to podcasts. They think, well, imagine what it would be if we could come and spend 3 days 100% focused on applying things to my business. That's a really valuable thing. So also then I know that if people are interested philosophically in that, but they can't make the dates or they can't travel or $5,000 is out of their price range right now, that I know that we've got other things that we can get them started on getting results so that they can eventually come to a breakthrough blueprint or eventually work with me one-on-one. And so everything is orchestrated in a way that maximizes that flow of people. And so I owe a lot of that, the genesis of that stuff, to this handbook of direct mail, combined again with all of the other books that I've read that make up that whole amalgam. Next up is The Psychology of Influence, of Persuasion, Robert Cialdini. Influence is the name of the book, The Psychology of Persuasion. And this book, I've got several copies of this one, but I read and reread and really had to shake my head at some of the things that he discovered about how we are impacted by different influence techniques. And so And again, this is one of the great things. It's so awesome that I get to meet my heroes and get to know people. So Bob and Bobette are friends. Joe Polish and I had Bob come and speak at our I Love Marketing conference, and he's been a tremendous influence in my life. But he talked about the 6 weapons of influence, here is what he calls them. And his original intent, he's a social psychology professor at Arizona State. And his intention for writing the book was to, as a protection for people to recognize when influence tactics are being deployed and how to defend against them. But it's become the textbook for how to architect persuasion situations, understanding the principles that are in play that are hardwired into our makeup, hardwired into how we perceive things and how we do things. So one of the greatest ones, and I'll tell you the 6 that he talks about, the idea of reciprocity as one of the weapons of influence. That, in short, if I do you a favor, you owe me a favor. If I give you something, that you feel like you need to give me something back in return. That's one of them. Scarcity is another one that's hardwired within us, that we're immediately attracted to something that is evidently in diminishing supply, that we value things that they're diminishing imminently, and we need to gather them up. Then the third is liking. And we tend to be influenced by people that we like, by things that we like. If we like something, we're more likely to do things that support that liking. Another is commitment and consistency. And I use this one a lot, that when people take an action, a public action or a public position or a public stand on something, we feel this need subconsciously to act in a way that supports that public stance that we've taken. And there's lots of subtleties around this, but it's something that the experiments, how they prove all of these in the books, are with experiments that they set up that show the influence of something. As an example, commitment and consistency might work in a political situation, that they will go out, instead of getting people to put a sign in their yard to vote for, they might go and they'll give people stickers to discreetly display in the window, or pins to wear in support of who their candidate is. And then when they come back weeks later to get them to put the sign in the yard, there's some crazy amount, and I'm not even going to try and remember the numbers, but a significantly higher number of people will be willing to put a sign in the yard if they've already made the commitment to put the sticker in the window or to wear the pin, because they feel this desire to act in accordance with the commitments that they've already made. Otherwise, it would be sort of out of character. In his follow-up book, Persuasion, he talks about an example of people putting something in front of the persuasion moment that amplifies the likelihood that they're going to do something that you're requesting. And so the example that he used in that is at the mall or in the stores where you see people coming up with the clipboards to try and get people to do surveys. So they would just go up and ask people, do you have a minute to do a survey? And they would get something in the low 30% range of people that they asked, do you have a minute for a survey, to do the survey. Then they did an experiment where, instead of just directly asking people to do the survey, which is what they wanted, they would go up and they would ask people a question. Excuse me, do you consider yourself to be a helpful person? And then they would wait for somebody to reply. And you think about this now, what are people going to say? How do you answer that question? Yes, well, it all considers. Would you have a minute to participate in a quick survey? And what they found was that when asking that question, do you consider yourself a helpful person, that 77% of the people would participate in the survey after they were asked that preliminary question of, do you consider yourself a helpful person? And I thought, man, that's so amazing that I use that. And that some of these things I don't even realize what the seed of the influence was until I consciously think about it and trace back the thought patterns. One of the things I do, I own a company called the 90-Minute Book Company, and we help people write books that they can use as lead generators for their business. And the reason I do it is because I've never seen anything as useful as a book for generating leads for your business in a way that sets up people being clients of your business. And so we use one of the great examples I use. There's a series of books out called, one of the books is Read This If You Want to Take Great Photographs. And they've got a whole series. The other book is Read This If You Want to Take Great Photographs of People. And then Read This If You Want to Take Great Photographs of Places. And the example that I use is, if you have a photography training course or a photography equipment supply company or something that would be an advantage if you were in front of people who want to be great photographers. It would be so much better for you to offer a book called Read This If You Want to Take Great Photographs, and know that every single person that asks for that book is someone who wants to take great photographs, and the odds of them then signing up for your course or buying something from your catalog or your website or taking a training with you are greatly elevated, because you stacked the deck in your favor. You've got people who, in order to even see that offer, are people who are self-identified as someone who wants to take great photographs. We did this. I've used this so many times. I had a book, and I've had Lane Bowers on the podcast. He's a barefoot water ski. He's got a barefoot water ski school here in Winter Haven. And we did a book called How to Be the Best Barefooter on Your Lake, as a lead-in to get a list of people who are barefoot water skiers so that they could be aware, because we include with it the catalog from their company that sells all the barefoot equipment that you need, including booms and wetsuits and handles and all the things that you're going to need when you are trying to pursue this desire of being the best barefooter on your lake, and coming to ski with Lane in person so you can train with a world champion barefoot water skier. We've used it with my girlfriend years ago. She created a device that combined LED light and galvanic and ultrasonic waves as a facelift alternative, an at-home treatment device. And one of the things that it did transformatively is cure adult acne, or any acne. But we did a book called The Adult Acne Solution. And we offered that book to people on Facebook. And when people respond, now we've turned invisible prospects into visible prospects, and we're able to have a conversation that, through commitment and consistency, leads to them being open to hearing about this device, the $900 device at the time. So that kind of thinking, I work with a podiatrist in Milwaukee who has a podiatry practice, and we did a book called the plantar fasciitis solution, that people who identify, who ask for that book, are raising their hand and saying, I've got plantar fasciitis. We just finished a second book on toe fungus. So when you start thinking about your own situation there, how can you activate commitment and consistency by just getting somebody to raise their hand? We did with a summer camp in Canada, offered a free week at camp. So that's an exciting opportunity to unearth invisible prospects. We ran that in the whole Toronto area. Everybody that responds now is indicating that they've got a child who's camp age and they want their kid to go to camp because they've entered to win a free week at camp. So when you start thinking about using this idea of commitment and consistency in a practical way in your business, that's had such far-reaching impact for me. So I can't think, you think about this as probably, let's say in the top 10 books, there's probably a couple $100 that investment there, coupled with the experience and the practical application of them that have made an amazing difference for me. And that's what I really want to convey for you. So I'll tell you the rest of the weapons of influence there. I talked about the reciprocity, giving, and I give you something, you feel like you want to give me something back. The commitment and consistency, doing something that is in consistent behavior with the stance that you've taken before. Scarcity, we're always attracted by something that has a diminishing supply, but not when it's smuggled in. As Robert says, we're not trying to create false scarcity. The reality of scarcity is telling the truth, like Jerry Spence talks about. Liking, doing things that we like. Authority is another one, that we're influenced by authority, by what doctors say or by what the authorities say, or it's why influencers are important. That's why we look at people that we trust that say things. And then social proof is another one, that whatever the consensus seems to be is very persuasive. That if social proof seems to be that everybody's using this particular service or this particular product, that must be the one. That's why Procter & Gamble spends so much time and effort on being the number one brand, because with the number one position comes a premium. This has been fun. I mean, going through some of these, and I can't believe how exciting it was to find this little ad here. I'm going to frame that, because this is literally the very first direct response ad that I created. This is like in my Smithsonian here. So I'm going to actually frame it, because I hadn't found one forever. But I want to encourage you to start looking back at the books on your bookshelf. And you can't go wrong with these books. You can't go wrong with them. And I may even do, going deeper on each of these books. Maybe we should start a book club of going through those books and seeing how they've influenced you. But that is what I wanted to share today. And now that I'm thinking about it, if you listen to these podcasts, you watch what we talk about, you're seeing now the magic formula here. You're seeing how everything kind of comes into position. And, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to work with you. If you want to be a guest on the More Cheese Less Whiskers podcast or the Listing Agent Lifestyle podcast, if you're a real estate agent, just go to those sites, click on the Be a Guest link, tell me a little bit about your business, and we'll be happy to spend an hour and focus completely on applying the 8 Profit Activators to your business. If you want to come, we do live events here in Orlando where we spend 3 days in a small group focused on applying the 8 Profit Activators to your business. And you can find out about those. Just go to breakthroughdna.com. And if you want to see how the 8 profit activators are shaping your business right now, go to profitactivatorscore.com and try our Profit Activator scorecard. We'll go through and ask you, help you find where you are on each of the 8 profit activators and where the biggest opportunity is in your business or what might be slowing your business right now. So you can find that out at profitactivatorscore.com. And if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. I enjoy working with people one-on-one because I know we get the best outcomes that way. So send me an email, deanjackson.com. Just put one-on-one in the subject line. Tell me a little bit about your business and let's talk about how we might be able to work together to apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time and I will talk to you then.